Hello you, it's me. Today we're going to talk about Everville, the second book of the art by fantasy horror maestro Clive Barker. I had this on my shelf for a while before I read it, and I'm trying my best to work my way through Clive Barker's entire bibliography and tick everything off the list. Had a lot of fun with this one. As always with Clive, I think there is interesting stuff to unpack. I'll be doing plot review, stuff I liked, stuff I didn't like. It'll all be marked on the time bar as per usual. In this universe, there exists another realm alongside our own called Quiddity, the source of human inspiration, dreams, and magic. A place which humans only get to visit 3 times: when they're born, when they fall in love, and when they die. In the first book, 2 individuals, Fletcher and the Jaff, through science and some hard graft detective work, respectively, became entangled in the magical underworld of people who know about the existence of Quiddity, and both sought to harness its power for themselves. They fought, they met a stalemate, they both created children to fight for them, the children fell in love, their fathers awoke in fury and brought a magical, apocalyptic war to a small American town called Paloma Grove. We pick up a few years after the events of Book 1, following a multitude of characters both in our world and in Quiddity, the Dream Sea. While Fletcher and the Jaff are dead, there still exists a power in our world looking to throw open the gates of Quiddity and let it bleed out. Meanwhile, in the Dream Sea, the looming shadow of the nightmare force known as the Iad Ouroboros approaches, gunning for the gates to the human world, consuming everything in its path. Weirdly, I had the same problem with this book that I had with book 1, in that I read about 100 pages, really lost steam with it, had to put it down for like 2 weeks, and then came back to it and smashed through the rest. I think it's maybe something to do with how dense the books are in terms of the stuff that's being thrown at you. They're pretty relentless in that they're just insane scene after insane scene. Lots of moving location, lots of changing POV, but then once I powered through the first little bit of the book, I really hit a good pace with it, and it turned out to be quite an easy read. Barker has a reputation for horror, and I think that's because of his iconic contributions to horror, like Candyman, Hellraiser, Nightbreed, but I think he is a fantasy author above everything else. He just doesn't shy away from the dark, more messed up sides of a world that fantasy takes place in. He accepts that the fantasy elements in the universes he writes would be abused, they would be twisted to other goals. They would be co-opted by people to their own weird, nefarious ends. But I don't think most of his books are horror outside of horror imagery, for the most part. It's like saying Twilight's horror because there are vampires in it. This one is very fantasy heavy, which makes it feel a lot more like Weaveworld or a Magica than the first book in the series, because all of the fantastical pieces, or a lot of them, take place in locations that are not in our world. Despite that, though, because of the characters, because of the grittiness of the characters, it does feel very rooted in our reality, and that we're peeking behind a curtain into an aspect of our world that we are not privy to. Both in and out of Quiddity, in the huge variety of places in which this story takes place, Barker builds a mythology. He builds cultures and religions and secret societies, and he begins to build a history that he has said will be the focus of book 3, whenever we get it. He gives us people that travel the cosmos collecting memories of despair that they adorn themselves with like rare jewels. He gives us a race that believes they're demons exiled from heaven but probably aren't. He gives us deep sea creatures formed from the shattered pieces of a creator god. There is really nothing like what Barker populates his universes with, and that's something you see in every one of his books. All the fantastic people don't feel like they are drawn from anywhere or have a basis in other mythologies, even though we have words like angel and demon thrown around. Everything feels original. There are a lot of characters in this book. To me, it didn't feel like there was a main character. It felt more as if the main character was the central pivotal event that everything else is swirling like a maelstrom around. There also wasn't a main villain. There was a calamity magnified by a lot of people who all had intentions surrounding the same thing, which was very interesting. Kisun, Buddenbaum, the Ouroboros, other hidden hands at work, there is just this onslaught of baddies. For me, as I was reading this, the character I didn't mind returning to again and again and again was Tesla Bombeck. With her web of friends, her film obsession, her gritty 1930s detectiveness, she really reminded me of like Sam Spady, sort of like Holly Gibney almost from the Stephen King books, The Outsider and the other one. It felt like there were a lot of side characters, but it did feel like all of the side characters got their plots resolved. I really liked the use of the townsfolk in Everville and the chapters that were spent just exploring their normal lives, which were like these very calm interludes, like islands in this swirling chaos. I really like the way that Barker talks about death as something transient and as a change of state rather than being the end of a timeline. That really had me thinking that a lot of the characters from book one weren't really gone and that we just bump into them around the corner. There are a lot of similarities drawn here between death and dreaming, between dreams and self created heavens. The book asks, are those the only kind of heavens there are? I also like the question it poses in, are dreams a result of being human and is quiddity a human creation? Or did we emerge from quiddity and being rooted in dreams, is that what makes us human? There is a weird divide in magic in a lot of Clive Barker stuff where he talks about feminine and masculine powers, creative and destructive powers, actors, observers. They're mentioned in here too, in a throwaway sense, kind of, not like in a Magicka where it's totally central to the story. Thematically, I thought there were a lot of similarities to Erin Morgenstern's The Starless Sea in this one. Unfortunately, even in the way that the last act was very fast and the ending felt a bit rushed. I think the main message of this book is destiny does what it will. When an event is coming, whether you're the hero, whether you're the villain, your part will play out how it was always intended to play part. And the best thing you can do is try and achieve some kind of catharsis. It's about playing with power you don't understand, the dangers of thinking you know everything when you don't. It's about the insignificance of us in the grand scheme of things. There's this very ants on a battlefield imagery going on through the whole thing. But while insignificant, it talks about human uniqueness to make themselves central in their own creations and how we appear in the eyes of others who don't have that ability. Is this human-centric vanity? Or is this refreshing in a world of fantasy stories where humans are a plague and they just tear apart the fantasy element of the story? Because that happens a lot. Stuff I wasn't sure about. There are spoilers in this bit, so if you don't want spoilers, skedoodle. I heard this one point about how the grittiness of the queer relationships in this book and the romance of the straight relationships in this book comes across as heteronormative. And I wonder if it is that, or if it's reflective of the hardships faced by people in queer relationships, and it's something drawn from directly from the experience of the author. I'm not sure, but there is definitely a difference in how queer interactions and non-queer interactions are written in this book. It's interesting. My main issue with this book is how it connects to book one. I think things were put in here that didn't need to be put in here just to make this feel like a sequel when actually it's a pretty insular story. Kisun being the son of the woman in Quiddity felt like a big reveal that didn't really land. And why were Joe, Beth, and Howie even there? Why were they there? It felt like just to tie it to book one. They were there for a chapter, gone for the whole book, came back for another half a chapter, and then gone again. The Death Kid came back for some reason, and everybody was very scared about them coming back. but what they were trying to achieve was so not relevant to anything else. I also think Jo Beth's personality shift didn't make a lot of sense at all to me, with her becoming very suddenly a very different person, falling out with the person that she'd spent the whole of book one fighting to be with, and then in a very unsatisfying Series 8 Jaime Lannister way, going back and pining for this incestuous thing that she had with her evil brother. I could understand all of these things if there was intention for a sequel, and Barker has said there is, but one which has the origins and the myths and the history specifically of quiddity central to its story. Book one was set in the human world, book two is set in the human world and quiddity. If book three was set primarily in quiddity, I think that would give the whole series a really nice symmetry. But yeah, with this book's dislocation to a completely new setting, didn't feel like a sequel. It took a long time for it to feel like a sequel, but I still really liked it. So thanks for tuning in for this review. Don't forget to follow me on Goodreads and Twitter. They're linked down below, and Instagram linked down below, and our Interstellar Book Club also linked down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more reviews. And I'll see you soon for the next one.
Bye-bye.